All right. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. All right. I think we got a full house, right? With that, let's go ahead and call our meeting to order at 6:31. Good evening, everybody. This is the February 22nd meeting of the Santa Barbara County Citizens Independent Redistricting Committee. Ms. Tilton, would you start us off by taking a roll call, please?
Yes, District 1, Commissioner Twibell.
Here.
District 2, Commissioner McClintock.
Present.
District 2, Commissioner Turley.
Present.
District 3, Commissioner Bradley.
Present.
District 3, Commissioner Hudley.
Present.
District 4, Commissioner Bray.
Present.
District 4, Commissioner Ochoa.
Present.
District 5, Commissioner Janet Rios is absent. She has a conflicting class schedule on Monday nights. That's why we'll be switching to Wednesday. And Chair Morris. Oh, I'm sorry. A member at large, Commissioner Almeida.
Present.
And Chair Morris.
Present. All right, welcome everybody. It's been a couple of weeks since we had a chance to get together, so hopefully you've used that time well. And we're ready to dig in again this evening. We are going to change the order of our agenda just a little from our past. Rather than starting with general public comment, we're going to take care of our open seat interviews, candidate interviews first this evening. And then we'll come back to general public comments. So before we jump into any of that, I would open it up for any public comment specific to agenda items 2, 3, and 4, which are the receiving the letter of resignation from Commissioner Katz and the interviews for the applicants. I would just make a point to the audience that we will take public comment following the 2 interviews as well, so that if you've had a chance to hear those interactions. So if there's any public comment related, I guess specifically to item number 2, the letter of resignation from Commissioner Katz, we would take that and then we'll come back for the rest of it. So is anybody raising a hand? Maybe we should explain how this works.
Tonight's meeting is remote, virtual only through the Zoom webinar, information identified on the public agenda. The meeting is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the internet at www.countyofsb.org/redistricting.sbc. Public participation during the meeting can only be done through the Zoom webinar link or by calling the phone number provided on the agenda. For those using the Zoom webinar link, please indicate that you wish to speak during public comment by selecting the raise your hand feature. Attendees by phone can raise your hand by pressing *9. When called upon, please state your name for the record. We reserve the right to mute a microphone for profane, harassing, or offensive language, or for speaking beyond the time limit set. The time limit for public comment is set at 3 minutes. Recordings of the commission meetings, agendas, supplemental materials, and minutes of the commission are available on the internet at the same redistricting webpage cited earlier at www.countyofsb.org/redistricting.sbc.
Very good. And again, would invite anybody from the audience that wants to make public comment around agenda item 2 at this point.
And I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. So with that, then commissioners, I would take a motion to receive and file the letter from Commissioner Katz, which is included in our agenda packet.
Make a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Almeida. A second, Commissioner Bradley. Thank you. Shalice, can we take a roll on that?
Commissioner Twibell,
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye, with regrets.
Commissioner Hudley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ochoa, Commissioner Almeida,
Aye.
and Commissioner Morris.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. At this point, folks, we're going to interview the candidates for replacement in the 1st District seat. Before we introduce the 2 candidates, again, just from a procedural perspective, we'll invite 1 candidate at a time to join us here in the on the panelist side of the Zoom presentation. We're going to go through the same 5 questions that we've used with all of our previous appointment rounds. Commissioner Twibell will ask the first question. Commissioner McClintock will take the second. Commissioner Hudley third. Commissioner Bray fourth, and Commissioner Ochoa will take the 5th question this evening. We'll go through the 2 candidates, and then we will take public comment at that point. And following the public comment, it would be appropriate if a member of the commission wants to make a motion for that appointment, we can do that at that time. I want to just make a point that staff reached out to the potential candidates. We have 2 that are interviewing with us this evening. I also want to just share with you that Claudia Knudsen, who is in the pool for the 1st District, responded and indicated that she would like to remain in that pool and be involved in the redistricting going forward, but that she asked that her name be removed from consideration tonight due to commitments on her schedule. In the event that we do not make a consensus this evening, she would potentially reconsider at some future date, but that was her choice for this evening. So, Ms. Tilton, with that, can I ask you to take this through the next step?
Yes, and Chair Morris, I do want to acknowledge that Dr. Montello declined to be interviewed. So there were potentially 4 that the commission had directed, and so we have 2 here tonight.
Thank you.
So the first will be Cheryl Trotsky. And each of the responses are to be limited, and I believe I'm sorry, I need to look at my notes. I believe it was 4 minutes.
I think we actually stayed with the same 3 minutes as we do.
The 3 minutes, okay.
So, Ms. Trusky, good evening. It looks like your camera's working well. If we could have you unmute as well so we can hear you. And I would invite you to just share a brief introduction, introduce yourself to the members of the panel, and then we'll begin with the questions. So good evening.
Good evening, Chair Morris and Commissioners. My name is Cheryl Trotsky. I want to start by saying I appreciate your time and commitment to this important work, and I thank you for considering me and giving me the opportunity to serve Santa Barbara County. I'm a long-term resident of Santa Barbara County. I live with my dog and 3 cats. This past year has been challenging, keeping my mother safe, but
Ms. Trusky, if I could interrupt you just briefly, it looks like you're having some internet stability issues. Perhaps for the moment, if you could turn your camera off and just use the audio, I think we would be able to hear you better. We may have locked her up completely. Can you hear us now?
I can. Can you hear me?
You're breaking in and out. If you could try
Yes.
turning off your
Can you hear me?
camera. Yes, Ms. Trotsky, you're breaking
Okay.
up. So if you could maybe turn off your camera and just use the audio, I think we should be able to hear you better.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I don't know what that's about.
It's just an internet connection issue. It happens to all of us in this format.
Okay.
So let me again, you were breaking up during your introduction. Let me give you a chance to just do that one more time and then.
Alrighty. Well,
Yeah.
again, good evening, Chair Morris and Commissioners. My name is Cheryl Trotsky. I appreciate your time and commitment to this important work, and thank you for considering me and for the opportunity to serve Santa Barbara County. I am a long-term resident of Santa Barbara. I live with my husband of 29 years, my 2 boys, my 93-year-old mother, 3 cats and a dog. And just want to say this past year has been challenging, keeping my mother safe. But we have successfully managed to keep her COVID-free, abiding by the CDC and state recommendations. And I'm happy to report that she just completed her 2nd vaccination, which is a relief. My career was in healthcare. I'm a registered nurse. I hold a Bachelor of Science in Business, and I owned and operated a home health agency in Santa Barbara. I have many interests: hiking, biking, rollerblading. I love being on the ocean, play pickleball. Both my husband and I strongly believe in our civic duty. We support local nonprofits, but the majority of our resources are directed toward the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission and Libero Theater. The Rescue Mission does an amazing work with the homeless population, and that's something super important to Ben and I. Thank you.
Welcome. Commissioner Twyfell, why don't you start us off?
Good evening. Why do you want to serve on the Redistricting Commission?
When I was allowed to return home after the Thomas fire, I surveyed the devastation that touched every part of our property. And I looked around and I just thought, how am I ever going to put this property back together? At that same time, the county swung into action and mobilized county, state, federal agencies and nonprofit resources all under one roof in a warehouse that was donated by the Santa Barbara Calvary Chapel. And when I walked into that warehouse, dazed and confused and overwhelmed, I was greeted by a staff person who asked how she could help me. And I was then directed, she led me to a table where she brought me to the assessor's table and she said, start here. And they were magic words to me. And I began to feel like I could do this. And so my first meeting was with Raul, the assessor, at the assessor's office, and then on to the next table, which was the building department, where I learned I needed to have a permit to remove burnt structures from my property. And then on to the franchise tax board and the contractors licensing board. And there were just a myriad of community organizations there to help with transportation, physical needs, emotional, spiritual needs. And it was in that moment, like never before, that I realized the value of local government and community support. And I see that same spirit here in this commission. The way you listen to each caller to make sure all interests are heard, the kind and respectful way you interview candidates, and the way you carefully ensure that the mandate of Measure G is fulfilled. I can get behind this. I want to be part of this work. I want to serve and give back to a community that's given me so much. And I want to also be a part of shaping the future of our county so that every voice is heard. This is an area of interest to me. It's an opportunity for me to learn about something that I only have a brief knowledge of. at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Morris, I hate to admit it, but I think I'm looking at the wrong set of questions because the second one doesn't follow the one Ms. Twibell just asked. So maybe somebody else should be asking this question.
Well, let's see. If you go to your packet for this evening, they're on page 7.
Page 7, you're right. I'm looking at the wrong one. I was thinking page 20. Thank you. There we go. Given the commission's initial 5 members and what you know about their backgrounds and skill sets, could you highlight elements of your personal background, experiences, skills, and knowledge of Santa Barbara County that you think will add to the overall diversity of the commission?
Thank you, Commissioner McClintock. I appreciate that question. Santa Barbara is a unique paradise of fabulous beaches, hiking trails, biking trails, a renowned city college, university, agriculture, urban and rural areas, vibrant culture and arts that celebrate all the varied lifestyles of our community. Life is abundant here, even in COVID times, because we can safely enjoy outdoor public spaces. I am a board member of our Homeowners Association, a member of the Montecito Association, a member of the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission Women's Auxiliary. And during the time my sons were in school, I volunteered weekly. Everything from hot lunch to being the team football team mom to fundraisers to help our school financially. In all these endeavors, I have given it my all. And through these experiences and the challenge of being a small business owner of a healthcare company, I benefited by getting to know people from all walks of life. I developed excellent problem-solving skills, time management skills, and the ability to work with a wide range of individuals and abilities. These relationships in my personal life and business honed my listening skills, honed my ability to find workable solutions, developed my empathy and understanding and a deep desire to see everyone around me thrive. As a survivor of 2 natural disasters, the Thomas Fire and the debris flow, I know what it's like to be displaced. And I feel like, and I also know what it's like to feel like I have no voice. When the sheriff knocked on our door at 4:30 p.m., January 9th, 2018, and said we had to leave now, there was no time to gather anything except our children and pets. And once we were outside the disaster zone, I quickly realized there was no place for us to go. Everything was taken in Santa Barbara. There were no vacancies. It was the kindness of a friend that allowed us to stay at her home. And we stayed there for 3 days until I found lodging. Excuse me, I'm just gonna get a little emotional at that point. It is these experiences that crystallize the importance of this commission to provide a voice for all our communities in Santa Barbara County, some of which have been overlooked in the previous process when lines were drawn 10 years ago. I know the trauma of being displaced and the panic of having nowhere to shelter. These were humbling experiences. Prior to this, whenever I saw a disaster reported on the news, I always felt sorry for those people. This experience forever changed my vocabulary from saying those people to saying we and us. And it gave me a heartfelt understanding of people in need. I'm confident that my academic background, continuing education, and life experiences complement the talents present on this commission. And I know I'll be an asset to the decisions and issues that this team will encounter. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. How would you help the commission draw lines that promote communities of interest?
I'm sorry, was that Commissioner Hudley?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Once the census becomes available in September, we will need to analyze the data. balance the needs of shared neighborhoods and interests with gender, age, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. Communities of interest will need to be defined and identified with the goal to ensure continuity and minimize division. I celebrate the rich diversity and shared experiences of living in such a beautiful place and look forward to exploring North County. It is critical, given the independent nature of this commission, that every community has a voice throughout this process, especially areas like Guadalupe and New Coyama. I'm hoping that through the work of the commission, that Santa Barbara will become an even more desirable place to live. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Ms. Trusky. Could you please describe a project or other experience in which you had to collaborate with a group of individuals in order to match or reach a common goal? And when you disagreed with these others, how did you handle those disagreements?
Thank you, Commissioner Ray. I started a home health agency in Santa Barbara in response to a need for a locally owned service that would meet the needs of clients with a special touch. While I approached this startup with a strong foundation in healthcare and business, I quickly realized that my skills needed to be updated and that I needed support. And I found that support in the Women's Economic Ventures here in Santa Barbara. With their support, I developed my business plan, launched my business, and continued managing my business alongside the WEAVE Thrive in 5 program. Informing my healthcare team, WEAVE advisors guided me, along with consultants and association affiliations, to meet the goal of providing quality care with a personal touch. In addition to managing human resources aspect of a service business, I regularly analyzed financial statements and weekly monitored my cash flow statement. This spreadsheet that I monitored weekly was a tool in governing my accounts receivables and purchasing and hiring. It was invaluable, and that was a skill that a tool that I learned at WEAVE. Building referral sources was another aspect of the business that I oversaw, managed, and implemented, in addition to assuring that I was compliant with 7 federal, state, and local regulatory agencies. The most rewarding aspect, however, of my business was helping clients and families in need. After an RN would do an initial intake, our healthcare team would formulate a care plan. This care plan was a collaboration of information from family members, the client, home health aides, the registered nurse, social service, and the medical doctor. Families in crisis and staffing challenges were a common theme, which would demand a calm, hands-on approach. When challenges arose, it was imperative in these situations that I listened fully. I always assume the possibility that the other person just might be right. And in doing so, I can then, it lowers any expectations on my part and allows me to listen to that person and hear what they have to say. In addition, I practice repeating what someone says to me so I can validate that they've been heard. And I find that those skills aided me greatly in developing my business. They've helped me in my personal life with friends and in my volunteer opportunities as well. And the success of our team was evident by client satisfaction and the growth that we experienced, which was pretty exciting. Santa Barbara is a town where word travels by mouth and pretty quickly. And this became a major source of our referrals. And as a result of our growth, compliance with regulations required that I hire a compliance officer. And the margins are thin in this business. So I had to decide I had a path to choose, and I chose to sell the business. At that point, I sold the business to a franchise that has a team of lawyers that can handle these compliance issues. You know, oftentimes I was governed by OSHA and the National Labor Relations Board, as well as the Franchise Tax Board here in California, and they have conflicting rules. So it just became too much. But one takeaway from my experience in this endeavor is that most of the time I found that it wasn't about my way, and it wasn't about the other person's way. It was about a third way, and a distillation of thoughts that produces a greater solution. And I just found that that third way was always superior to anything I could have ever come up with on my own. Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Trosky. How do you think the Commission should address the problem of public education and outreach on redistricting to help encourage broad participation in the Commission's work? What are some ideas you have for the Commission to solicit public input on the redistricting process and methods of public outreach to ensure transparency?
I love this question, and thank you, Commissioner, for asking this question. I'm excited about this topic. And I have to say, in watching the meetings, I was thrilled to hear the spirited public comment section of the meetings throughout. And it was just thrilling to me, because public support and public input and public involvement is essential to the success of our democracy. I agree with previous candidates that we must use Spanish and English radio, social media, public service announcements, coordination with community organizations and groups. However, I would first start with the 175 applicants that did not make it onto the board. I would formalize that relationship, find out their alignment with organizations and groups, and because this group is already interested, they already know what we do. We don't have to explain it to them, and they would be great advocates to spread the word. I also think in our messaging, the name of the commission needs to be demystified and conveyed to the public in a way that they can understand why this issue is important to them, and how it'll shape the future of Santa Barbara. And then finally, another thought I had, which may seem like an outlier, but while I was standing in the line, the pharmacy line to get my mother's medications at CVS, I read an advertisement for a home health agency that was right there by the place where you pick up your meds. And I thought, why not post an informational piece about the commission in pharmacies, grocery stores, hardware stores, gas stations, banks, coffee shops, other places that people frequent? Because in that way, there's going to be someone in every household that goes to one of these places. And we will then capture individuals that aren't on social media, or maybe they miss the advertising radio spot. And so those are my ideas. And again, many thanks to you for your service and the opportunity. I look forward to serving this commission in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trosky. We appreciate your interest in the commission and your clear interest in serving in the community. We're going to move you back over to the audience side of the Zoom for a few minutes. We'd invite you to please stay, because depending on what we do, we may need you back in a few minutes. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
And our next applicant is James Scorso. I'll get him.
Good evening, Mr. Scorso. Let me invite you to unmute your line there. You're still muted there, sir.
Is that better?
Much. There you are.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. Again, would also invite you to take just a moment and introduce yourself to the panel, and then we'll turn to the questions.
Okay, my name is Jim Scorso. I have lived in Santa Barbara County since I was about 5 years old. That's a long time ago. Okay, I have moved from Carpinteria to Santa Barbara, to Goleta, back to Santa Barbara, now to Montecito. And I've been worked for an aerospace company locally here for about 35 years. And I've been very, very involved with local activities, charities like Villa Magella, Unity Shop, and just a lot of others that occupy my time. I've been retired for a while now, and I still stay involved with all those charities and local activities. Okay.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Karen. You're on mute.
Okay, let me start over. Good evening. Why do you want to serve on the Redistricting Commission?
Well, I think redistricting is a very, very important activity that we do every 10 years. And it's important that people in the community who have common interests get recognized and that they get represented properly. Okay. I don't represent any particular organization or any particular political organization. Okay, so I think I'm independent in that way. And like I say, I just have been involved with the local activities and local charities most of my life in Santa Barbara. I think I can help. I can contribute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Given the commission's initial members and what you know about our backgrounds and skill sets, can you highlight elements of your personal background, experiences, skills, and knowledge of the county that you think will add to the overall diversity of the commission?
Well, I've got a little bit different background than most of you people on the commission. Again, I worked at an aerospace company for about 35 years. One of my activities on there that I volunteered for was belonging to a group that was called the Go Club, the Give Once Club, which all the employees, about 1,500 employees, contributed what they could out of their salaries to various charities. And once a month, we would get together and allocate those to charities that appealed to us and needed help on a monthly basis, a yearly basis, or sometimes a panic basis of immediate money. So I did that for about 15 years with the company. We distributed several thousands of dollars over the years. I have, I was going to say, I started in Carpinteria as a 5-year-old. I moved to Santa Barbara High as a senior in high school. I went to UCSB, went to City College, eventually quit both, got a job, got married, joined the Army, went to Washington, D.C. for 3 years and worked at Walter Reed Hospital, and then came back to Goleta, adopted 2 children, bought a house, and kept working at the same company. So my skills are other than the ones I've seen reported here, but I think I've got a skill set that would supplement and add to the ones you already have. More recently, I've been a docent at the Lotus Land here in Montecito, and I've been on the board of directors for the Goleta, I'm sorry, for the Tacumba Mutual Water Company. I was on board of directors for that for several years, trying to, that's an independent company owned by the shareholders or by the property owners. Okay, and that's been part of my activity recently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My question is, how would you help the commission draw lines that promote communities of interest?
Well, before I start promoting ideas, I'd look at what we have existing, okay? One of the problems in looking at this is to say there is a problem that we've got to fix. Well, let's look at it carefully and find out if there indeed is a problem before we try to fix it. Okay, I'd start off by interviewing people and going around through the community and finding out what their particular concerns are. Okay, and then try to lay out a plan. Okay, the planning comes after you get the data, not beforehand. That's about it.
Good evening, Mr. Scorso. Could you please describe a project or other experience in which you had to collaborate with a different group of folks and individuals to reach a common goal? And when you disagreed with those others, how did you handle those disagreements?
Okay, well, as I said, I worked for an aerospace company. Okay, I started off as a lab tech and then became a project engineer when I got my degree in chemistry, and then ultimately got an MBA at Pepperdine. And in the process, went from project engineer to department manager, then to the project, what they call program manager. And in the process, I worked with people who had very high skill set with advanced degrees in chemistry and physics. And my job was to form a team out of these people and guide them down a direction that would accomplish the task we were given. A project may be a small one, or sometimes quite large ones, where multiple people had to work together with different skill sets, but they all had to be reminded of what the job was and what the ultimate goal of the project was. And that was my job, plus keeping things in budget. That's about it.
Good evening. How do you think the commission should address the problem of public education and outreach on redistricting to help encourage broad participation in the commission's work? What are some ideas you have from the commission to solicit public input on the redistricting process and methods of public outreach to ensure transparency?
Well, I think the young lady who preceded me had some great ideas. Okay, putting flyers out was a great idea. Going online to neighborhood networks and that sort of thing online would be good. I also think, and I wasn't sure I heard her properly, but you've just interviewed dozens of people over the past few weeks for this application or this position. Those people are interested in the community welfare, and they could be used as a resource. Okay, to ask them to aid, even though they weren't appointed to the commission. They have ideas that they'd like to bring forth, and I think it's very important to hear the people who have already volunteered to do this. Okay, it's very important to me that we hear all the voices of the community, not necessarily the loud voices. Okay, thank you. You have any more questions?
I think that's it. So thank you, Mr. Scorso. We appreciate your interest in being a part of this process and your service in the community. Again, we're going to have you step back over onto to the observer side of the fence for a few minutes, and we're going to take some public comment and have a discussion here. So please don't leave.
No problem. I'll be waiting.
Thank you, sir. All right. With that, we will open our public comment related to the two candidates that we have just interviewed, and take any input that people may wish to share at this point. Ms. Tilton, do you want to guide us through that?
Yes, we have a request to speak from Lee Heller, followed by a caller that's identity is Santa Barbara GOP.
Very good. Good evening, Ms. Heller.
Chair Morris and commissioners, I've missed you. It's been a couple of weeks. I wanted to begin by thanking both of the people that you interviewed because they really were thoughtful. Their stories about community involvement really moved me. It's just lovely to have people who are so committed to the community. And I'm not making recommendations. You don't need me to do that. I thought Ms. Trotsky was very polished, obviously did a lot of preparation, which I appreciate. A couple of times she maybe wasn't quite as on topic, although she came back. And I thought Mr. Scorso had some great answers about waiting for the data, because I think that's going to be really important to the work. And also talking about his teamwork skills. I have a kind of weak spot for engineers, I have to admit. And I love the fact that they have a real skill at teamwork, that's essential to doing successful work as engineers. So there's something to be said for both of them. This should also, I hope, solve the problem of the claim of insufficient Republicans. And again, I just want to express my appreciation to both of them for taking the time to be interviewed and for being willing to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
The next speaker is Santa Barbara GOP, followed by
Good
Mr. Brandt.
Good evening. If you could identify yourself and share your comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I still haven't been able to figure out how to put my name on the heading here. But my name is Bobby McGinnis. I am the chairwoman for the Santa Barbara Republican Party. And I wanted to say that I thank all of you for your service and your time that you give the commission. And I think that both of the candidates here would do a great job, and they would definitely satisfy our need to have a third representative on the commission. So it gives you guys an opportunity to right a wrong, if you will. We're only asking the commission follow the measure that was passed by our voters, so it represents the diverse interests of this county. And even though we have only 28% of the county as our registered voters, I'm hoping to increase that over the next several years. It's an important part of our county. And I worked the campaign to get this measure passed. I really would like to see it follow the letter of the law, because after all, this was an elected commission, elected by the voters at large. And so either one of these candidates would be acceptable to us, and would be a huge, would take a weight off my shoulders in terms of fighting for our personal interest in the commission. Cheryl Trotsky tonight was excellent, very polished, but I also like Jim Scorso, but I support either one. They have an R next to their name, and that would satisfy our need from the Republican Party. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next speaker is Spencer Brandt, and followed by Christian Alonso.
Good evening, Mr. Brandt.
Hi, Commissioners. Spencer Brandt from District 3 here. I think I'm going to be brief because I think I'm in agreement with the previous commenters, and they've already said essentially what I'm thinking. I think you have two good applicants in front of you. They both have different strengths. They both come from a business background, which I think can be valuable in terms of bringing in different types of folks into the process. Ultimately, I know I was really, I think, inspired by just really the commitment to service that was expressed by the first applicant. And that definitely really spoke to me. I think either would do an excellent job as a commissioner. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker is Christian Alonso, followed by Peggy Wilson.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners, and my fellow redistricting nerds. Thank you so much for your time tonight. My name is Christian Alonso, and I'm from District 1. I've been following along, and I'm thankful for your commitment to making this process transparent. I think both speakers tonight did a really good job in the interview, and I'm thankful that we have so many folks in the community interested in this work. I'm also glad that we're putting forward some Republican partisan candidates to fix the representational issue. We need folks to trust the process, and I think this will go towards affecting that outcome. And so all that having been said, like the other commenters, I really appreciated Cheryl Trotsky's polish in the interview, but I also appreciated their sentiments regarding community solidarity during the tragedies of the Thomas Fire and the debris flow. So thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker is Peggy Wilson, followed by Dar Ringling.
Good evening, Ms. Wilson. I believe you're on mute. If you could unmute, we can. There you go.
Okay. Am I unmuted?
You are, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Commissioner and panel, my name is Peggy Wilson, and I'm a long-term resident in Santa Barbara. And I do live in District 1 of the county, and I did work on this campaign to pass the measure that created this commission. And the measure to create the Citizens Commission won overwhelmingly in our county. And the work that you do is super important and will have an impact on the elections, as you know, for the next 10 years. Currently, Republicans represent about 28% of the registered voters in the Santa Barbara County. We are a small but diverse minority party. With the resignation of Ms. Katz, it allows the commission to correct a wrong. And we are asking that the commission live to the measure passed by the voters so it represents the diverse interest of this community. So I super support the addition of another Republican to this commission. Either Cheryl Trotsky or Jim Scorso would be an excellent choice. I do know Cheryl Trotsky personally. We're pickleball players and partners. And so I totally appreciate her. And as you heard from Cheryl, she is very compassionate. Her work with the rescue mission is, you know, indicative of that. Cheryl's articulate, she's compassionate, she's a problem solver, super respectful, as you can tell by just interviewing her today, very integrated in the Santa Barbara community. She has a business background, so does Mr. Scorso, which is great. She shows she can work successfully. Lastly, Cheryl is a team player, and it is my sincere belief that she would be a valuable asset to this commission. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
I see one more hand raised, Dar Ringling.
Good evening.
Hi, this is Dar Ringling. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Well, first off, I wanted to thank you commissioners for taking the time to listen to us and also be a part of the commission, this important commission, and that your care and concern for our community. So thank you so much for your service. I listened to both of these, Cheryl and Jim. I thought that both of them would be an addition, a welcome addition to the commission. And I especially listened to Jim with his engineering degree and his project management, working with different groups of people. I think that would be very valuable. And Cheryl certainly had the passion, is very articulate. So I think that both of them would be a good addition. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We have Claudia Knudsen, followed by Deidre Heath.
Good evening, Ms. Knudsen. Ms.
Good
Knudsen.
Good evening, commissioners and chair and panelists. Well, I'm so glad to have heard the interviews here. I think it's wonderful that you'll have a solution to the Republican Party with a choice of two excellent candidates. And I would like to just say that I see the panelists, the panel of, sorry, I'm not very good at talking in something that's so important, I'm sorry. But I do see that there is more men in the commission, and I think Cheryl Trotsky would add what I feel a very important part, another female voice, another mother, and a woman who's had her own business. And so I just wanted to state that. I think they were both wonderful, but I do have a slight preference in that I'd like to have heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last hand I see raised is Deidre Heath.
Good evening, Ms. Heath.
Hi, my name is Deidre Heath, and good evening to everyone. I was impressed by both candidates. I do know Cheryl. I've worked with Cheryl, and I know her to be very dedicated and passionate, especially when it comes to our community. And I know she's committed to making the process fair and transparent. So I'd like to give my recommendation for Cheryl Trotsky for this position.
Thank you very much. Bye. Was that it?
I see no more hands raised.
All right, very good. We'll bring this back to the commission, and Commissioners, I'll open it up to you all for any discussion or a potential motion to appoint one of these candidates. Mr. McClintock.
Well, I'd echo what a lot of the public comment made obvious, which is both candidates have really great qualities, and we'd be lucky to work with either. I was particularly impressed with Ms. Trotsky's ideas for public outreach and education, and her enthusiasm for that topic, which I think is going to be, we all know is going to be an extremely big part of what we do. So I'm sort of leaning toward her at this moment.
Very good. Who's next? Mr. Bray, and then Mr. Almeida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo what Commissioner McClintock said. I think outreach is so important. And one of the things that I hadn't thought about, I thought was kind of interesting, was the fact that Ms. Trotsky talked about going back to the 170 plus people who had applied. I never thought about that, but what it told me was she's put a lot of thought into outreach. That was number one. Number two, she seems to be very grounded in the community. So does Mr. Scorso as well. But I was particularly impressed by what brought her to this point of applying for the commission. I saw a passion there just because what she had gone through. And I think passion is good for our work.
Very good. Commissioner Almeida.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Cheryl Trotsky, very well qualified, very well prepared. I really appreciated her passion. I think gender balance, as was brought up, is critically important. She's a Republican. So, I mean, I would like to move to kind of cut the chase and to make a motion to appoint Cheryl Trotsky to the board.
Very well. We have a motion to appoint Ms. Trotsky as a member of the commission. Is there a second to that? Commissioner Ochoa, I see you as a second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Anybody want to add anything to the discussion? Ms. Purley.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to bring this up because it was part of a previous public comment. And I want to say first off that I really appreciate Ms. Trotsky's emphasis around community solidarity and her comments about changing her vocabulary specifically from those people to us. I thought that was great. Just that I am curious if she would like to take the opportunity to speak to public comment in regards to her comments from the Independent in the spring of 2020, specifically that she drew an equivalence between events like weddings and concerts and protests against police brutality and racism. And I just think it's important specifically to our communities of color in Santa Barbara that they understand that she is going to be able to serve them in the same way that she's able to serve other constituents.
Very well. Mr. Critchwell, is it appropriate to invite her back over to respond to that?
The interview has concluded, so we can give her the option. I mean, that's out there, so I think we should definitely give her the option to respond.
Very well. Dr. Tilton, can you bring Ms. Trotsky back over? Welcome back, Ms. Trotsky. If you could unmute and if you choose to respond to that directly, or you could indicate a preference not to. But did you hear and understand Ms. Turley's question?
Not quite. And I have to confess, I really don't remember what exactly I wrote. I'd have to have her explain again because it was a long time.
Yeah, I'm happy to explain it. I actually do have the text here.
Okay.
Specifically the line, "Isn't it time for us to allow to gather for graduations, concerts, weddings, and other community events if we can gather to protest and honor George Floyd and Black Lives Matter?" So specifically the public comment around this was that there was some concern that there was a lack of understanding on your part about, why someone would gather for something that the Santa Barbara Public Health Department has named as a public health crisis, racism and police brutality as opposed to weddings or concerts?
Well, I appreciate your concern. I really do. And I, at that point, was thinking about the ideas of all the lives that my son didn't get to experience his graduation, and a lot of things were going on, and it was a pretty emotional time for a lot of people. I certainly have deep compassion for what happened to George Floyd, and I have compassion for those situations and all that's happening in our country now. And in no way should that reflect on my service to this commission. I a lot of work with the homeless population here in Santa Barbara, and have made a commitment to helping people that are disadvantaged and less fortunate. So I hope that answers your question. I am sorry that you took it that way, because it wasn't how I meant it to be taken.
Yeah, just to clarify, this was a public comment, so it's not necessarily my viewpoint. I just wanted to raise it.
Okay.
So thank you for your response.
You're welcome.
Very good. Thank you. Any additional comments or discussion from the commissioners? If not, Ms. Tilton, could I have you take a roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Twibell,
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Hudley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bray,
Aye, sorry.
Commissioner Ochoa,
Aye.
Commissioner Olmedo,
Aye.
Chair Morris.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. So could we invite Ms. Trosky back once more? And let me also introduce Jacqueline Alexander from the County Clerk's Office. Did I get that right, Jacqueline? The right department? County Clerk's Office. Excellent. She is going to administer the oath of office, and we will pause for just a moment while she takes care of that business.
Thank you, Chair Morris and commissioners. Good to see you all again, and thank you for your work. I am hoping that we could get Cheryl's camera back on. Is that possible, Cheryl?
There you have it.
Fingers crossed this works. As I told a few of the commissioners that I saw previously, this will be painless and pretty quick, and you'll be on your way. So if you can please stand and raise your right hand, I'll administer the oath of office. And repeat after me. I, Cheryl Trosky, do solemnly swear
I, Cheryl Trosky, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California.
that I take this obligation freely
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
It is official. Thank you very much.
Well, Commissioner Trotsky, welcome to the panel. Ms. Alexander, please don't take this the wrong way, but hopefully this is the last time we are the cause of you being out this late on an evening.
No worries. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much. All right. Again, Ms. Trotsky, welcome to the commission. We look forward to serving with you, and hope you had planned to spend the rest of the evening with us. All right. With that, folks, we're going to return back to our agenda. At this point, we will open for general public comment. This period would be for items not appearing on the rest of our agenda. We'd be looking for just open general public comment at this time. Open.
And we have a request to speak from Lee Heller, followed by Spencer Brandt.
Welcome back, Ms. Heller.
Chair Morris and commissioners, first of all, I wanted to welcome and congratulate Commissioner Trotsky. And I can see her now, which is also really nice. So that's awesome. And I can't see her pets. I wish I could because I'm an animal person. I don't normally use general public comment for things off topic, but today is such an important day in America. And Ms. Trotsky talking, excuse me, Commissioner Trotsky talking about keeping her 93-year-old mother safe reminds me to remind all of you that over 500,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 as of today. So I'd like to use 10 seconds of my public comment here for us to observe a moment of silent recognition and memorial for them, because those are our countrymen and women. We should care about all Americans. And so here we go, if you don't mind. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and appreciate that acknowledgement. Mr. Brandt, welcome back.
Hi, commissioners. Spencer Brandt here again, and hello to Commissioner Trotsky. Well, we're happy to have you, and congratulations on your appointment. I want to speak today to the issue of a demographer. So when this process started, the redistricting process, I was definitely surprised to see that the county had awarded this contract to a demographer before any of you had a chance to meet, and before all of you were even selected as a commission. But now, having observed the RFP process in real time as you made a request for your new legal counsel and got to interview a number of firms and consider their proposals based on the merits and interviews, I really see that process as something that should be echoed with a demographer. You have multiple responses from other firms that indicate that they would respond to an RFP. And on first glance, it seems like both of those firms are qualified. I kind of think that you might get even more responses if you floated an actual RFP and gave a longer time frame for those responses than just the 1 week time frame that you'd given for the letter of interest. Really, I think what makes this issue really pressing for me is the troubling track record that the National Demographics Corporation and Mr. Johnson have. I don't think that their philosophy is compatible with your commission. Your purpose as an independent redistricting commission is to remove the influence of incumbent lawmakers on the redistricting process, bring the power back to the regular people like ourselves. And Mr. Johnson has publicly criticized independent redistricting commissions, as quoted in a Cal Matters article in 2019, where he said he didn't see the need for them. Right next door to us in Kern County, Mr. Johnson took the witness stand to defend gerrymandered maps that the federal courts tossed out because they packed predominantly Latino areas of the county into one supervisor district. And if you read the arguments that he made before the courts, they are troubling. He's arguing against the existence of socioeconomic and educational disparities in these Latino communities. I'd like to see someone with more of an equity mindset that recognizes the realities of what's happening in Santa Barbara County. So this really only scratches the surface, I think, and I hope you'll refer to the letter I sent in early February that details what I think are these unsettling patterns. And I hope you'll consider opening up this process once you have more time to focus your attention on it. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any additional requests for general public comment?
We have one last speaker, Andy Caldwell.
Good evening, Mr. Caldwell. There you go.
Hello, commissioners. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I realize you guys are probably working as hard as any other commission in this county, and we appreciate it. As you know, I spoke at your last meeting and I submitted into the record. I don't think it got into the record until today. There was an organized effort, and when I use the word organized, that's a specific word. There was an organized effort to submarine or torpedo Nielsen Merksimer as the law firm, even though Nielsen Merksimer has maybe 100 times more experience working with redistricting commissions than Fred Wucher. And Phil Seymour did a superb job of building a record as to how Nielsen Merksimer should be disqualified. But all the while, him and Mr. Wucher worked on a re-election campaign of former Supervisor Doreen Farr within the 8-year prohibition. Well, now that they've got Nielsen Merksimer out of the way, now they're coming after the your demographers. Now, your independence, and this is what we're fighting for, we don't care what map you draw as long as it's independent. So I'm not trying to influence you on virtually anything else except to maintain your independence. What you've got are party activists that wanted Wucher over Nielsen Merksimer, even though Wucher is known to be a Democratic Party lawyer. And for instance, Spencer Brandt, who comes before you, works for the Democratic Party of Santa Barbara County. He's a paid staff member. So it's not just independence from elected officials. We're looking to keep you independent from party influence if we can. And I still believe that you guys made a huge mistake with regard to Nielsen Merksimer because nobody vetted Fred Wucher for you ahead of time. I didn't. I got caught unawares. I didn't know until Nielsen Merksimer mentioned that Wucher had worked for Doreen Farr, and he never mentioned her by name. We had to go to the county records because I didn't know. I didn't follow that issue. But those two guys, Seymour and Wucher, racked up over $500,000 in legal bills for Farr. And now they're going after NDC. You guys are being influenced vis-a-vis subterfuge and innuendo by people claiming they're watching out for your independence, but I beg to differ. And again, go back and look at the record. Seymour and Wucher's names are on the 460s. They're on the 460s. I didn't have a dog in that fight. I've never worked with Nielsen Merksimer. But I just do know that they were the most experienced. Wucher had to hire that consultant or he would not have been qualified for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And I see no more hands raised.
Very good. Can you read into the record our written correspondence at this point?
Yes, thank you. We have written correspondence. We have 4 items all submitted by Andy Caldwell. The first is regarding filling the vacancy within 10 days. The second is a letter to the county CEO regarding ordinance violations, specifically filling the vacancy within 10 days. Ordinance violations for Fred Wucher's previous history. Also a letter regarding Wucher being a contractor for Supervisor Farr with an attachment. So actually there were only 3. One of them had an attachment, and that's all.
Very good. Okay, maybe before we move on, just Mr. Churchwell, can I get you to just give folks a quick status update on where we are with negotiation with the with our new council and or where that is with the county's process to get it to the Board of Supervisors?
Yes, so thank you, Chair Morris, and good evening, commissioners. So the issues raised about Mr. Wucher will be are being researched very thoroughly and will be presented to the Board of Supervisors. As you recall, we have recommended to them that Stromwasser and Wutcher be the law firm hired for the commission. And so that issue is now over in that forum. So anyone that wants to comment on it can do so there. And I do expect that there will be some discussion, of course, about that issue, maybe something in writing before that meeting. And so that's kind of where that stands.
Okay. And Ms. Anderson, if you're available, do you happen to have a best guess on a date that the Board of Supervisors will take this item?
Chair Morris, yeah, they're looking to bring that on March 9th, unless something changes, but my understanding is that that is the targeted date.
Very good. Okay, just wanted to make sure everybody was up to date on where that process stands. Commissioners, we'll go to item number 6. If there is a motion or a discussion around leadership of the commission, we can take that up now. Mr. McClintock.
Yeah, I think now that we have a full commission, it only makes sense to nominate you as Chair Morris as our permanent chair. You've been doing such a great job. We'd hate to lose you. So I'll put that out there. And also, I would not be able to fill your shoes in your absence. Running meetings is not my forte. So I would like to suggest that we seek another vice chair, and I'd be open to any nominations. But in the absence of other nominations, I would like to nominate Commissioner Turley.
All right, so if it's the commission's desire to open nominations, we can go ahead and do so. Is that the commission's desire to open nominations for the position of chair? Thumbs up. Okay, I'll now open nominations for the position of chair. Commissioner McClintock has nominated Chair Morris. Are there any further nominations for chair? Hearing none, Commissioner Morris has been nominated as chair. And I can turn it over to you, Chair Morris, for receiving nominations for vice chair.
Well, thank you. And I'm humbled and honored, folks. I appreciate your support. We have, I believe, one nomination so far for the vice chair. Mr. McClintock has nominated Commissioner Turley. Commissioner Turley, you accept that nomination? Are you willing to be considered?
Yes, I'm willing to be
All right.
considered. Thank you.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Ms. Twibell.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Bradley
Mr. Bradley.
for vice chair.
Mr. Bradley, are you willing to be considered?
I'm willing to be considered, although I'm very enthusiastic about Commissioner Turley being our vice chair.
Very well. Ms. Tilton, how do we handle this? Do we need to get a motion on that, or do you take a poll of the, well, let me, before I ask you, are there any others before I assume not? Apologies. Okay, we'll assume nominations are closed. Now, Ms. Tilton, how would you recommend?
I'll be taking roll call in the order nominated. As soon as the person nominated receives 6, actually it takes 7 votes of the commission to take action. So if that first nominee receives 7 votes, there'll be no need to continue. We'll start with our newest commissioner, just because you're first on our list, Commissioner Trotsky. This will be for nomination for Vice Chair Turley, Commissioner Turley for the seat of Vice Chair. Commissioner Trotsky. Oh, I think
you're muted, ma'am.
There you go.
I would be a nay.
Commissioner Twibell.
Okay.
Commissioner McClintock.
Aye.
I'm sorry,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Headley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ochoa,
Aye.
Commissioner Olmedo,
Enthusiastically, aye.
I'll finish out the vote, but I believe we have a new vice chair and Chair Morris.
And I'll also be an aye.
All right, congratulations, Vice Chair Turley.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's proceed then. Item number 7, we have minutes for 2 meetings to be approved. The meetings of February 1st and February 3rd. Unless someone has corrections to one of those documents, I would take a motion to accept them.
I'll motion.
A motion from Commissioner Curley. Do you have a second? Commissioner McClintock, thank you. Back to you, Ms. Tilton.
Commissioner Trotsky? You're muted, but you may choose to abstain unless you've read the minutes, then you and watch the video.
Right, I'll abstain.
Okay. Commissioner Twibell,
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock,
Aye.
Commissioner Turley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Headley,
Aye.
Commissioner Bray,
Aye.
Commissioner Ochoa,
Aye.
Commissioner Olmedo,
Aye.
Chair Morris.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, folks. Item number 8, disclosure of ex parte communications. Does anybody, any member of the commission have an item to report at this time? Mr. Bradley.
I had a online Zoom session on Friday, February 5th with 4 NDC staffers, Doug Johnson, Daniel Phillips, Chalice Tilton, and Jeff Tilton, regarding my email of February 3rd about various outreach activities in other counties as possible templates for what our county might do.
Good. Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Nope.
Mr. Johnson.
This isn't a disclosure, just a heads up that we have figured out how to do the Google Sheets so that each commissioner will have their sheet where they can enter their communications. And then all of those 10 sheets will get pulled into one public document. It'll have a tab for each commissioner. So it's not ready for tonight, but over the next week, we'll get that out to all of you. And at future meetings, we can simply remind folks of where the URL where that's available to everyone. So we haven't figured that out. We just don't know how to implement it yet.
And I presume you'll send some detailed instructions to us on how to make that work.
Yes.
All right. All right, Commissioners, the next item on our agenda is a placeholder for a closed session to conference with legal counsel. I don't believe, unless Mr. Churchwell has changed his mind in the last hour or so, I don't believe we're going to go to closed session, but I believe he has a brief explanation to give at this time.
Yes, so thank you, Chair Morris. So we put that on there as a placeholder because, of course, the agenda has to go out before we really know what we're going to need to do in terms of negotiations that are going back and forth. And we received a comment from Mr. Scott Rafferty pointing out that, correctly pointing out that if we were going to discuss it tonight, we would need to give some flavor to what exactly are we discussing in closed session. Sometimes you have to provide that. In some cases, you don't. This case, we would have to. If I could share my screen very briefly, you will recall that we received a demand letter, those of you who were on the commission, on December 18. And let's see here. From the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce and the Santa Barbara County Republican Party. So it was a joint letter from those two organizations, and termed by them a demand letter. And the first meeting that this could be discussed was January 11. And this, what you're looking at was if you go to the January 11 meeting agenda and go to public comment, this is listed as the third comments on January 11th. So when we discuss it, if we're to discuss this demand letter, we would point out that that is what we're going to discuss in closed session. But of course, tonight, as Chair Moore said, we have nothing to discuss, no new news in that regard.
Very well. Thank you, sir. All right, that allows us to skip item number 10. Since we had no closed session, we have nothing to report. We will now take us to item 11, which is a need to amend our recently adopted bylaws. Who's going to do the explanation on this? Elise or Doug? Which one of you, or Steve? Who's going to introduce this one?
I'd be happy to do it, Steve, or did you want to take the lead on it? This is a simple change to the bylaws to allow us additional time to fill the vacancy. The original language said 10 days. The county's advising 30 days. And so as staff were recommending, we revise that language. It's a simple change from 10 days to 30 days. It's amended and restated so that we only have to give one copy to anyone asking the bylaws, as opposed to here's the original, here's amendment 1, here's amendment 2. So it's a first amended and restated, but the only change is the number of days to fill a vacancy.
All right, so let me just pause briefly and see if there's anybody from the public that wishes to comment on this item before we bring it back to the commission for a motion.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, we'll bring this back to the commission. Any questions or discussion, or if you're ready, commissioners, I'd accept a motion to adopt this amendment to the bylaws. Ms. Tribell, you're muted again.
I saw it in other additional changes in the bylaws. Article 4, Section 3 went from 7 to 6 members of the commission. That was a change between the original bylaws and the amended and restated.
I believe that was wasn't that a change that was made during the first meeting?
Yes.
I didn't have a note on it. So
It was.
it was, okay.
Ms. Curley.
Yeah, my only concern with the 30 days, although it's nice that it does give us a cushion, is I'm thinking later on in the process, if we lose someone in September or November, that means that basically by the time that we complete the map drawing process, we could have had a commissioner out for that entire time. Or, you know, if we lose someone in the beginning of November, they would be of no help to us by December 1st. So that's my only concern with that.
Yeah, and I think what we're doing is giving us the outer limit. We could certainly move more quickly but this gives it. So this was really, I think, a response to this current cycle, because we were not meeting within 10 days. We technically were outside of our bylaws, so we want to fix that. But I think you raised a good point that we get deeper into this process, timeliness will be essential. Any other comments, or does somebody wish to make a motion to accept this amendment?
So moved.
McClintock makes the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Almeida, thank you. Ms. Tilton?
Commissioner Trosky?
Okay.
Commissioner Twibell?
Aye.
Commissioner McClintock?
Aye.
Commissioner Turley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley?
Aye.
Commissioner Hudley?
Aye.
Commissioner Bray?
Aye.
Commissioner Ochoa?
Aye.
Commissioner Olmedo?
Aye.
Chair Morris?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, folks, we are now at a point where we're going to actually start talking about redistricting, I think, a little bit. Our next agenda item, item 12, is the opportunity to discuss census data release schedules, public hearing timelines, outreach requirements, mapping criteria. And so, Mr. Johnson, I'm guessing you're our first one up.
Yes, I'm going to start this, although all three of us from NDC are going to participate in presenting this to you. I think we got Mr. Phillips here too. Oh yeah, there he is, good. And as you said, this is exciting to actually get into the actual redistricting work. So this will be just kind of putting our toe in to familiarize all of you with number one, an update on the census data. And then number two, with the basic requirements. As you may have noticed later on the agenda is more of a detail, a proposal on how we would go through all these redistricting elements in detail in a series of information/training sessions. But to get, just to start going, let me share my screen. And over here. See how we go. Okay, so I will start off talking about the census data. As you all have probably seen in the news, the Census Bureau is in the worst of worst case scenarios from a timing perspective. As you heard before, their statutory release date, where the law says they're supposed to release the data we need, is March 31st of 2021. Of course, because of COVID and all kinds of other stuff going on, they are not going to make that date. And their first announcement was that they would release the data no sooner than July 31st, which was a big delay, but could be managed. The latest update is that they will release the data by September 30th. And I should note, some people did draw some hope from that, saying by September 30th, maybe September 1st. And so the Bureau quickly clarified that when they say by September 30th, they say best case, it might be September 28th. So expect it right in there, September 28th through 30th. It's not going to come out earlier than that. The other thing to keep in mind is that in California, state law says that the state is going to adjust that data to move people who are in state prisons to their last known home address. And the state folks who do that work are still saying they need 30 days to do that work. Now, I'm hopeful that they will change that position and they will get it out faster than that. But currently we're looking at getting the data that you are mandated by law to use as late as October 30th. And of course, your deadline to finish is just a few weeks after that. So this is going to be a big challenge. A couple of things are going on this front. There's likely to be legislative changes, an emergency bill that would go through the legislature that would move the deadlines on the back end, the election deadlines for things like signatures and candidate filing, in order to provide more time for groups like you on the front end. There may also be court action. You may be aware the State Redistricting Commission actually went to court back when the July 31st date was announced, and the state Supreme Court gave them an extension. I don't think the court had really thought anything this late was possible, but by the math of the state Supreme Court, the state commission's deadline is now February 15th. So they've been pushed back from their originally August 15th deadline to February 15th. That, of course, is going to play havoc with the June primary. So there's lots of swirling things around this. We will see where these deadlines go. Once we have, we'll see. I was thinking that once Stromwasser and Uch are on board, we probably have them looking into possibly following the state into court for a ruling on this. If that gets delayed, we may have another task for Mr. Churchwell to pursue for us. But we do have the time to sort out our legal counsel before we have to jump into that. So that's our current timing. And Ms. Tilton's going to talk a little bit about our timeline and how this all impacts getting to what the state has as its deadline is December 15th. I should note, as noted at the bottom here, what is delayed is the total population count. And there are racial and ethnic breakdowns that come with that. But those are not the racial and ethnic breakdowns that we use for Voting Rights Act compliance. For that, we use citizen voting age population data. And that, along with all of our socioeconomic data, comes from the American Community Survey. And we also get registration and turnout data from the state. All of this is part of the big pool of data. The American Community Survey and the data on registration and turnout by surname are not delayed. So the good news is we can start getting the community involved. We can start holding hearings and all that, looking at all these socioeconomic factors and other definitions of communities of interest long before the census data comes out. So that's the silver lining of this. The only piece that's delayed that really directly impacts your work are those total population counts. We are working on trying to get good estimates that what we're trying to figure out is a formula using Department of Finance and census data to ballpark what we think the census data will be so that people can start drafting maps, residents can start drafting maps. Our first swing at that kind of came out with data that isn't close enough. So we're taking another swing at that, but probably by your second meeting in March, we'll have a good answer on that. And the key thing that would provide is you could put the mapping tools out there so that the residents could be drawing their maps and getting ready. And then the residents will only have to fine tune their maps once the official data comes out and not start from scratch. So unfortunately, it's really bad news from the Census Bureau. They are, of course, focused on getting the data right. And it does play a bit of havoc. So there will be a lot of moving parts statewide. We're already in touch with San Diego and other counties that are facing the same challenge. And of course, Mr. Wucher is legal counsel to LA County, so he's involved there. It is worth noting that the big impact is on jurisdictions that have June elections, such as the county. And there are some cities and some special districts. The cities and other jurisdictions that have just their first election in November, their deadline isn't until April, so the delay doesn't hit them nearly as hard. So that's the current status of the census data. With that, I'll hand off to Ms. Tilton to talk about the timeline requirements in the statutes and in the laws.
So when we're talking about the requirements for the commission, we're talking about two different sets of requirements. One is the ordinance that was enacted by Measure G. And secondly is what we find in the elections code. The unique thing about those is both languages are being drafted at the same time. So they had pretty much shared language, but then at some point Measure G was adopted and the language kept evolving in the elections code and the Fair Maps Act. So there's differences in some of the overlapping languages, and we are going to go into more depth on item 14 when we talk about the outreach criteria. One of the big differences, so you'll see the second column says the source, and when it says ordinance, we're talking about the ordinance that governs this commission, and so that is Measure G. And then you'll see when we list election codes, that's state law. So that's where the source is, and we've overlapped because we need to abide by both requirements. So we'll start in March, and state law actually only requires one hearing be held before any of the draft maps are produced, but the ordinance requires there be 7. And one of the requirements of the ordinance is that we hold a meeting in each of the supervisorial districts, which in the COVID era, that may or may not be an issue. So we'll be conducting them by Zoom. If things ease up remarkably, by spring, summer, that we may be holding some physical meetings in the supervisorial areas. I do want to point out that these are the minimum. So these are just the minimum requirements of what we're required to do. it's our expectation that we'll go well beyond what the minimum requirements are for outreach. So 7 pre-draft map hearings in no fewer than 30 days. So you can't hold them all on one day and call it good. You'll be holding them over a period of at least 30 days from March to September. And the purpose of those meetings are going to be to get communities to identify their communities of interest. We'll be providing tools for them to be able to actually draw maps of what they think their communities are, so that when we start to draw the bigger maps, we'll make sure that those communities are kept together. So we won't even have the census data until September 30th. And then, as Doug said, 30 days later is when we expect the prison adjusted numbers to come out. And then we'll be able to release draft maps, where we'll be actually to be having these hearings and actually talking about draft maps. There was a requirement that says once the data is ready, you have to wait 3 weeks to let the public get used to what the data is, play around with it before you release a draft map. That's going to be waived. The legislature anticipated that there could be a delay in the data, and fortunately said if it's fewer than 60 days to the deadline to adopt, then that 3-week waiting period is waived. So it will be waived in the case for us. Then we'll have 7 hearings. 6 of those will be, again, to receive input on maps. And the 7th one will be the adoption of the map. And we anticipate that happening October to December 12th. Obviously, the big challenge is going to be the holidays. So we'll have Thanksgiving coming up, and then start to get into December. It just gets very, very busy, but it's nothing new to NDC. We've had several redistricting and districting projects happen during the holidays, and it's doable. But again, that requirement is that it's spread out over no fewer than 30 days. And then, of course, we're looking to adopt at the latest our map on December 12th. That's in the elections code. The ordinance says December 15th, but there also is a provision that should the commission not be able to decide on a map by December 15th, or should the commission not be able to get 7 affirmative votes on a map, which is required, then there's a fallback that actually there'd be a supervisorial commission that would be created that could adopt the map by December 31st. So we want to get it done. We want to get it done by the December 15th at the latest. We're targeting December 12th at the latest, but that's what we're looking at. So keep in mind, up through September, it's going to be receiving input, and then we'll actually start being able to get into the actual true maps until October, after we've held those seven hearings, and which will likely be end of October is when we start talking maps. The next slide. Doug, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm just to say, I think Shalice touched on well that this is a bit confusing because it is an odd mix of the county ordinance and the state laws having been blended together. And then, of course, the census delay messing up all the timing that was anticipated when these bills were written. So this is what is currently laid out. But again, we expect some legislation and or court ruling to give you a little bit more time, we hope.
The next 2 slides is the comparison of what the outreach requirements are. So this one is what's provided in the county ordinance. Much of the language, in fact, the first paragraph, the first sentence is identical in both the county and the state law. The second sentence, it says these steps shall include. In the state law, it says, I believe it says, shall make a good faith effort to include all of the following. And then when we talk about item 14, we're actually going to go through a comparison of what these differences are. But you can see it's very prescribed, both in the ordinance and in state law. And we're working very closely with the county's PIO office to get their list of the media, the news organizations, those organizations that reach out to the non-English speaking communities and other communities that are typically hard to reach. So this just gives you a snapshot of what the ordinance says, and we'll be talking more about it in item 14. And then the next slide gives what the state requirement is.
Oops.
So the state law, it's the item 2 we'll be focusing on. We want to make sure we find those good government, those civic rights, those civic engagement, and community groups that are active in the community. So that's what we'll be really relying on you as commissioners to go to your resources. And as we'll be speaking to, we really want to get those who are already engaged in the communities, those that are already have alliances or have community groups who are already reaching out and helping different segments of our communities that are have lower turnout in lower turnout areas. So the purpose of these 2 slides is just to make sure you're aware we have particular guidelines we need to meet. It's our expectation we'll go beyond those, but we are well aware that we'll be following both the ordinance requirements as well as the state requirements.
And with that, I think Daniel Phillips is going to come on and talk to you a little bit about criteria. And let me just caution everyone that if you think the timeline requirements were confusing, wait until you get to these criteria. So with that, I'll let Daniel take.
So let's pause just for a moment before we get too confused and just see if anybody on the commission has any questions about what we've heard so far. Ben.
Yes, sir. So just one question on the post-draft maps. You said there were 6 meetings. Is there also a requirement to have one in each district? And again, I'm assuming 6 meetings would be the minimum.
There's not a requirement that the post draft maps be in each supervisorial district. And I would think as they anticipated maybe the logistics of actually working with the map and the map data and all of that. I'm not sure, Doug, what the reasoning why the drafters didn't include that requirement for the post draft meetings. It's certainly if that wants to, the commission it's your decision of where you want those meetings. There is a requirement that the locations vary and that the times and the days of the week vary so that you can meet work schedules and to get as much public engagement as possible. So now, we have this set schedule of the first and third Wednesdays at 6 o'clock. That will need to vary once we get into the public hearing phase so that it's not just in evenings. It's not just, one location once we start meeting in locations.
Thank you.
But you're right, it is odd, but there's that requirement for one each district is not in the second round, it's just in the first round.
But we could do that if we wanted to. We thought that was important.
Of course, yes.
Any other questions? Felice, you knocked it out of the park. Everybody got it.
So I will share again and let's see. Go back. There you go. And now bring on Dr. Phillips.
All right. So thank you, commissioners. Now, with the mapping criteria, we had to realize that according to the county ordinance, there is a ranking of criteria. So we want to, if any of these criteria should come into conflict, we would want to prioritize those that are higher up in the list. So the number one overarching criterion is equal population. And that is something that the US Constitution, of course, it mandates. And so we have to follow that, but it is not a perfectly equal population. So I just want you to realize that there is some wiggle room that is allowed, usually no more than 10% total population deviation. But we do want to make sure that the districts are, as all things being equal, as all other things being equal, as equal in population as possible, so that we follow the principle of one person, one vote. The second criterion is following the Federal Voting Rights Act. And the most important element of this criterion is making sure that those that are considered in protected classes are not having their votes diluted by being split up into different districts. So the idea here is that there are certain historically marginalized or disadvantaged groups of people that we want to make the purpose of the Federal Voting Rights Act is if it is at all possible for there to be a majority of this certain protected class in a district, we want to try to make sure that happens. So the idea here is those that have historically been disadvantaged to have the opportunity to elect someone of their preference. And so we want to see if it's possible to have what are called majority minority districts in the literature. And if not possible to have that, then to have influence minority districts, which means maybe they're not a majority, but they might be close to majority. And so we want to try to see if that is possible to find a district that would allow for that, if not multiple districts. The third criterion is following the California Voting Rights Act. And that is something that the ordinance, that's something that the ordinance requires, but actually the California Voting Rights Act does not have any language having to do with redistricting. Now, number 4 is where it gets pretty complicated. So bear with me here. I'll do my best to explain this. So what number 4 says in the ordinance is that we have to follow Elections Code 21-500. And also down here, give consideration to the following factors: topography, geography, cohesiveness, contiguity, integrity, and compactness of territory, and community of interest of the supervisorial districts. Now, when this ordinance was first written, Elections Code 21-500 basically said what I just wrote. Only it said that the commission may give consideration to the following factors: topography, geography, cohesiveness, contiguity, and compactness of territory, etc. So what the ordinance did is they said we have to follow Elections Code 21-500, and we're going to say you shall give consideration. However, after the ordinance was written, Elections Code 21-500 was changed, and that is the California Fair Maps Act. And what that act did was put in these rank ordered criteria into the Elections Code. And so now, if we were to follow Elections Code 21-500, we would have to follow these this list of criteria as you see here. So the result here is that there is some repetition. So some of the criteria that are listed here come up later on, but just to be thorough and to go through this as it is written in the Elections Code, the state Elections Code, as a result of the Fair Maps Act. The districts must be contiguous, which means they have to be one piece. They can't be disconnected pieces. The one exception here is, of course, islands that are off the coast. So the Channel Islands would have to be, of course, in one or more districts, even though they aren't contiguous to the rest of the county. But besides that exception, we want to, these districts have to be connected and not disconnected parts. Number 2, the geographic integrity of any local neighborhood or local community of interest shall be respected in a manner that minimizes its division. The state law actually defines what a community of interest is. It's a socioeconomic group that would benefit from being kept within one district for purposes of its effective representation. And so of course it's up to you and the residents of the county to determine and define what these neighborhoods and communities of interest are. But once you do that, that will help you, because that is the second most important criterion in this elections code. Number 3, the geographic integrity of a city or census designated place shall be respected in a manner that minimizes its division. So in this county, there are 7 incorporated cities, and there are also several what are called census designated places. And these are areas that are not formally cities, but they are dense urban clusters that such as Orchid, East Goleta Valley, Montecito, Summerland, Cuyama, Casmalia, those types of places. So we want to make sure that they, to the extent possible, are kept together and not split up. Number 4, easily understood boundaries. So the district boundaries, to the extent possible, would follow natural boundaries such as rivers and mountain crests and major highways. So that would be a consideration that you might have if after 1, 2, and 3. Number 5, compact districts. So the idea here is that you, if to the extent possible, want to avoid bypassing one group of people to reach another group of people. So this may not actually have to do with the shape of the district itself, but the point here is to make sure that you aren't intentionally going around one group of people to get to another. And after all of that, the elections code says you shall not favor or discriminate against any political party. So you don't want to see where all the Republicans live and pack them all into one district. You shouldn't have the opportunity to look at any of that type of voting or partisan data. So that is everything that is in Elections Code 21-500. And then, like I said, you shall give consideration to these other factors that are somewhat vague, but also somewhat repetitive of what's in the election code, but the ordinance says you shall. So that is something that you need to consider.
Daniel, let me have you pause there. It looks like Commissioner Turley has a question.
Thanks. I just had a quick question, and Dr. Phillips, it's completely fine if you don't have an answer for this. I'm just curious what an example of bypassing one group of people to reach another group of people looks like in the redistricting process.
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. I do have an example in mind. And of course, this may not actually happen. It's just a possibility. It's a hypothetical, but you ask for it. And just to note that this is number 5. So there may be good reasons to draw such a district for more important criteria. But say you were to draw a district that includes Carpinteria and Montecito and Summerland and those areas. And then you draw the district so that it goes up and gets a piece of Orchid up in North County. So that would be a contiguous district technically, because it would be one sole landmass. But you might have a case that would be a non-compact district. Traditionally, actually, that would be considered compact, such a district, because of its shape would look actually pretty round-ish. But it would not be compact in the letter of the law here, because that would be bypassing people in Santa Barbara, Goleta, San Ynez Valley, etc., in order to reach those people all the way over in Orchid. So that is an example I have in mind of what would be a non-compact district in my estimation, by the letter of this law.
That's really helpful.
Mhm. Are there any other questions, or should I proceed?
Mr. Bradley.
Yes, sir. I'd like to just very quickly clarify your 10% deviation. Is that from the county as a whole from the total count or from adjoining districts?
Yeah, so the idea of a 10% deviation, and the best way I can explain that to you is 0% deviation would be, of course, that all the districts are perfectly balanced in population. But you might have one district that's a little over the ideal population. The ideal population is taking the county's population and dividing it by 5. That's the ideal population. So if one district goes 5% over that ideal, so they have 5% more people than the ideal, and another district goes 5% under the ideal, you would add the two to get 10% deviation. So it goes both ways. You take the amount that goes above and you add it to any amount that goes below. And that is that would be an example of 10% deviation. And so that would be the very limit that we would want to, ideally, we wouldn't want to go over that 10%. Does that make sense?
Yes, it explains it. If we have cases of, you were talking about marginalized, underrepresented populations as being a very high priority. If we have people who are simply difficult to count, how does that figure into that 10% or plus or minus 5% calculation?
So we have to use the data from the census. So we're hoping that the census data is reliable and useful and accurate as possible, but that is what we are legally required to use. So we had to take the county population that the census gives us and divide it by 5, and that is the ideal that we have to use. Does that answer your question?
It does. I think I have other questions later, perhaps about what if those numbers appear to be grossly off. I know we have quite a few large HTC zones throughout our county, and there was worry that we may have missed some large numbers in some of our districts. And if it becomes, let's just say hypothetically, obvious that there's been a gross undercount of a population, let's say it deviates so drastically from 10 years ago or from phone records or whatever, what is our recourse?
Let me step in and say, as someone hinted, Commissioner Bradley, I think that's a question better left when we have our potential litigation counsel on board. and they can help us address that question, because we do get into issues of constitutional burden of proof and all kinds of factors like that.
Very well, thank you.
So if I can, I'll just finish off the list of criteria here. So everything I just talked about was under number 4, and that's just one paragraph in the ordinance that says that the commission has to follow Elections Code 21-500, and it shall give consideration to those factors. Then the next bullet in the ordinance is that the district should be contiguous, which of course is a repeat of what's in the Elections Code. But like I said, that wasn't in the Elections Code when the ordinance was written. So repeat there. Number 6, respect cities, neighborhoods, and communities of interest. Another repeat. Number 7, districts should be compact. Another repeat. Number 8, they shall not consider, they being the commission, shall not consider incumbent or candidate locations. So the districts should not consider those locations, nor should they be drawn to favor or discriminate against any incumbent candidate, or political party. So the difference here, so it's not an, this is not a repeat, because there is one key difference here, and that is that you, in addition to not considering political party, you also cannot consider where any incumbents or candidates might be living. So that is it for the list of criteria. And unless there are any more questions about the criteria, then I'd be happy to give it off to Doug again.
Daniel, just for clarification, that last point's a fairly significant change from past redistricting, if I'm correct, is I believe that in prior iterations, protecting incumbents was an optional criteria that commissions could or could not choose to respect. Now you're saying it's not an option at all.
Correct. So there are definitely some jurisdictions that would have that option. So many cities and some counties have that option. But in the case of the ordinance, which you are directed to follow, the ordinance says that you cannot favor or discriminate against incumbent candidate or political party. So that's an added prohibition on top of what's in the election code.
Very good. Any other questions for Dr. Phillips? Mr. Johnson.
Okay. We'll just one point when we talk about the Voting Rights Act, I do want to come back to a little bit just to highlight what Daniel said about avoiding, if you can draw a majority minority seat that is reasonably geographically compact and has cohesive communities, then as a rule of thumb, you generally have to. Actually, most of everything I know from this comes from Justin Levitt, who's part of the legal team coming on board, and we will have them do an in-depth look at it. But there is a little bit of gray there with effective districts and things like that. So there's a rule of thumb, and then there's the lawyer's details that we'll get into at a future training session with your legal counsel too. So, let me move on here. So the last piece of our presentation in terms of requirements, and again, this is running through the minimum requirements that you have to do, is that the key thing to remember, as you saw earlier tonight, it does require 7 votes, not just a simple majority, but a full 7 votes to adopt a final map. So that's a quick review. I will note that these slides are actually text taken out of a 2-page Word file that is in your packet, at the very back of your packet, are all these materials. I think we made some small typographical edits, but in putting together slides, but the material you have and the substance you have is in your packets and available to the public. And of course, we'll post this presentation after today too.
Very good. Okay, Commissioners, before we jump into any discussion on this particular item, I'd like to take a quick pulse. A little after 8:30, we have 2 more substantive items on the agenda here. My recommendation is going to be that we postpone item 13 to our next meeting, and that we finish this evening with item 14, because I think it's related more closely to the items we've been discussing on this particular item. And then for members of the public, I haven't forgotten you. What I'd like to do is finish item 14, and then we can take public comment on both of these items at the same time following. So Commissioners, is that acceptable? And Mr. Johnson, let me make sure that I'm not completely messing up the plan here.
If I can just very briefly show, because part of the training schedule actually includes something for the next meeting. So it's just one slide, if I can just take 30 seconds to show.
All right, well, very good.
So, and then we'll post this slide afterwards. You can look at it in more detail, and we can revise everything after, or revise everything at the next meeting. So let me switch back to that. So just, this is kind of what we envision as a fairly typical when we work with the commission process. So in terms of covering the basics, we've gone through the requirements today, but obviously there's a lot more to this than simply meeting the requirements. So the thought is March 3rd, we cover what is redistricting, and what are the roles typically played in an independent process by commissioners, by staff, and most importantly, by the public. And then you can see we get into the census data and all that geography and on March 17th, spend a lot of time on criteria and defining the things that Daniel was talking about there. Voting Rights Act we have at the end, mainly to give your legal counsel time to get on board, but also because often people remember most the thing they hear last. And so that is so important. We want to really have that in mind. And then the fifth session would really be showing you scenarios, actually exactly what Commissioner Turley spoke about. We would include those in each session, but then really go through some scenarios that we've seen and other commissions have run into. So this is flexible. If others have things you want to change, we can discuss that at the next meeting. And I should note that I'm sure Commissioner McClintock and others have noted there's nothing in here about the mapping tools and the software, because these are all intended as big picture lessons. Separate on those agendas will be evaluation of tools and things like that. We haven't forgotten about that.
And so as I read this, based on our current meeting cadence, that would take us to late April timeframe, and which would then tee us up for the beginning the public hearings and outreach around in middle of May. Does that sound about what you're expecting?
Yes, although I would add too that as with the mapping tools, the outreach items we're about to start, there would be other items on those agendas, including the outreach elements that we're about to talk about. So. Very good.
Okay, Commissioners, are you okay stepping into agenda item 14, or do we want to take a quick stretch break? Are you ready to press on, or? I'm getting thumbs up. Doug, we're back to you on item 14.
Okay. So I guess probably best to have me do the presentation, and then we'll come back for public comment. So folks can comment on the presentation, if that works for you.
Yeah, no, I'd like to hold public comment on items 12 and 14 for after this.
Okay. Okay. So this is a bigger picture introduction. We talked earlier about the requirements of outreach. This is a bigger picture goals of outreach and how we achieve them. So first of all, when we think about outreach, of course, the main thing is who's our audience? Who are we trying to reach? So of course, there are interested individuals, as has been mentioned earlier tonight. You have about 175 of them that declared their interest, their deep abiding interest in this commission by applying. And obviously we hope there are hundreds more across the county who individually will get engaged. Then there are the statutorily required groups that Shalise went through earlier with you. No surprise, these are kind of the reason redistricting reform takes place and why commissions get formed, which is to make sure that we listen to the underrepresented communities. And of course, engage the good government, civil rights, civil engagement, community groups that are active. And as all of you have brought up before, including those active in language minority communities who often don't get involved in these kinds of processes. But we also want to find out what are other groups out there. Every group that has an interest either in redistricting in general or in any other county policies, because of course, redistricting relates to elections, and elections impact everything from homeless aid to welfare policies to all of the huge multitude of tasks that counties undertake. So we need to engage every group we can find that has an interest in county policy. So number one, we want to identify audiences, and this is continuous. It's not just at the start of the process. Throughout the process, hopefully we'll be learning about more groups and adding them to the list. Then there's the activities involved. Okay, once we know who we want to reach, how do we reach them? Again, the requirements you heard earlier, we have to go through media, social media, public service announcements. The big one is really coordinating with your community organizations. And then of course, posting everything on the internet website. And it'll be posted in multiple languages. In terms of coordinating and reaching out to them. This came up. I was very happy to hear this come up again and again through your interview process. Go where the people are. This is a weird issue. It's hard for people to grasp onto. It seems so purely political. It's hard for people to connect it to, the quality of the schools or the safety of neighborhoods, or how they are going to feed their kids in a given day. So it's really hard to get people to come to you on this. So we have to go where they are. And often this involves, ideally, commissioners yourselves going to community meetings and telling people, this is why this issue matters. Please come to our meetings. As we get into more of the action plan, we'll get into, Brown Act concerns and all that. There's certainly ways to do that. The main thing to keep in mind is when you're going out to community meetings, it's more to encourage people to get involved. It's not as substantive. You're not looking for which map do you like best. You're looking for, here are 10 maps. Why don't all of you in this group think about it and come to our meeting to tell us which one you like best, or email us to let us know which one you like best. So that's a key thing we will emphasize more as we go along. But it's not just community groups. There are also non-traditional outreach events. Farmers markets tend to be a very interesting one once we can all go back to farmers markets and do things in person. There was the great idea today during the interview Ms. Trotsky brought up about, put flyers in places, when you go through the shops, you often see flyers for bands and, all kinds of different community events. Certainly, I think that's a great idea to put flyers in there about your outreach events. So identifying those non-traditional things are really what we want to do. The county is obviously constantly communicating with residents, has great channels to its folks that are interested in different issues. But the reason you all are commissioners is to bring non-traditional ideas and to bring your ideas and your knowledge of other ways to reach people beyond what the county is already doing every day. And when you're doing this, think about one of the lessons of the census itself and of redistricting is it's all about trusted messengers. On these weird, potentially very political issues that are kind of out there, people really respond to someone they know or to someone they trust telling them this matters. A paid ad in a newspaper alerts people who are already involved and who already understand why this matters, that this is going on. It doesn't capture the underrepresented population, people who aren't paying attention. They listen to the people they already talk to. And so it's getting those trusted messengers to carry your message to them that we've seen work time and time again. So figuring out who those trusted messengers are is going to be a key part of this process. So once you have your audience, you have your methods, what are your messages? At a big high level, we've focused our efforts around what we call the 3 E's. First is engage people. As I mentioned, this is a weird issue. Why does someone care? Isn't this just elections, and aren't elections decided by money? Why does this issue matter? So first, you just have to hook them and get them to understand this is important to them. This does impact the issues they care about. So you have to engage them. Then once they're engaged, we can educate them. Somewhat like the presentation you just saw. What are the rules? What's the process? What's the timeline? And then now that they're informed, then you really hit the goal, which is to empower them. How can residents make constructive contributions? Come in and say the process 10 years ago stunk, I hated it. Well, that's a legitimate policy share, but it's not really constructive to you getting a map drawn. So we really want to encourage folks, how can they be constructive and help you move along in your path? In particular, that's how do they draw their own neighborhood? How do they submit those maps, whether they're super tech and want to use all the online tools, or whether they just want to sit down with a piece of paper and draw their neighborhood. How do they do that? How do they get that to you? And then, of course, our ultimate goal is for folks to draw either an individual district that's best, that they think is best for their area, or even better, a full county map. And hopefully get lots of those in, reflecting all those communities of interest. And then, of course, we're not only interested in full maps that people want to draw, how do people share their opinions? Ideally, we'll have this engaged crowd who take the draft maps back to their neighbors, back to their organizations, and go back to that first issue of why do they care, and evaluate which maps are best for the reasons they care, for what issues they're worried about, and for the neighborhoods they're concerned about. So once we identify our audience, figure out how we're going to reach that audience, then we need to walk them through this process in order to get them to drawing maps. And we've seen this work time and time again. It is hard work. It is a challenge, but it really does pay off when you see people at those meetings with the maps they drew and commenting on their community's map and saying that map meets our goal and that map doesn't. It's just a great moment because this is a tough project. So in terms of steps to get there, what is the work that lays before you and us, and the county is of course going to be a big help in this process. First is compiling that list of community individuals and organizations. Some of that will actually have individual organization lists, some of which, in talking with the county staff, they have their different channels. So they may not want to publicize the individual emails getting each message, but they can tell us that, okay, all the homeless groups are getting these messages, that kind of thing. So compiling those lists before who we know we need to reach is one big initial task. Then we need to identify the best channels to reach those audiences. Which ones will hear and respond to Spanish radio ads? Which ones will respond to all the pastors and priests and rabbis carrying the message? Which ones will get the message at farmers markets? Figure out how do we make sure we're reaching each of these groups. Then of course, we have to get the look, feel, and messaging, actually write and draft all these messages. And we want to keep going. Initial contact is key. Then we need to engage them, but we need to keep checking in and updating the messages so that folks know, especially now we have all these delays. We want to be sure that folks that engage early on, we don't lose them, and keep them updated of what's going on and how they can participate. And then, as I mentioned before, we never finish step one. The whole time we're always want you to always be on the alert for who are other groups that we've missed. Each group that comes in, we want to say, who have you not seen here yet? And how can you help us reach them? So those are the tasks. And for you individually as commissioners, and of course for the individuals, I like the term the redistricting nerds who've been paying attention to everyone's meetings. Hopefully they will all do this. Number one, help us build the list of individuals and organizations. We will be getting lists together. As Shalice mentioned earlier, that's under development. And we've also built an online submission form, just a Google Doc that will put the link on the commission's website where folks can submit names of organizations that they think would be interested in participating. Now, there's a big note at the top of the page that we put in there. If you're an organization leader or you're an individual, you don't need to put your information on this form. There's actually already an email list. It's at the very top of your website, and where people can just sign up and that'll get them involved. But if you know of groups, we're hoping each one of you will, dump 5 or 10 groups that you know of onto this list, and we can make sure they're getting contacted. Then of course, we'll ask you as commissioners to engage individuals and groups on behalf of the commission to participate. Spread the word in your personal networks. This is how you got chosen, is because you are interested and engaged in your community, and ask them all to sign up for the email list, and then help us with identifying those groups. And of course, you'll be intimately involved in them designing and improving the messaging itself. Ultimately, it all comes back to that idea of go where the people are and communicate through those trusted messengers whenever possible to get that word out. And that is the kind of big picture. Here's your task. Obviously, there are lots and lots of individual steps involved in achieving these tasks, but that's our introduction to the challenge and the typical steps that get you there. So, phew, that was a lot. But
that was a lot. Commissioners, I've had a request submitted that we take a 3-minute break really quick. When we come back, we'll do some discussion among ourselves. We'll take some public comment and see if we can wrap this up. But With no objection, we're going to take a 3-minute personal comfort break for everybody. Be right back.
how do I get my picture back on?
You should be able to just click that little video icon down in the bottom left.
All right, I did. Let me try it again.
I'm getting a message that says you cannot start video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, I got that too. And now I got one that says start my video. Okay.
Jim, can you try that again? Oh, there we go.
We're back.
All right. We're back. We'll reconvene our meeting. Thank you all for that indulgence. Mr. Pinto, are you still with us this evening?
I'm here.
Okay, I wanted to just introduce you to the group. Mr. Pinto's with the county staff and will be, I think, assisting us with some of the public outreach. Is that correct? Anything you wanted to add to the presentation before we go to discussion and public comment?
No, I trained Doug well. I didn't train him at all, but he covered it in a nutshell.
Very good.
But I'm here to answer any questions if the commission would like information.
Okay, well, thank you for being here and sticking with us tonight. And thanks in advance for your help in getting the word out on this. Commissioners, any questions that you all have that you want to clarify from the presentation before we invite the public to make comments? Mr. Bradley.
Thank you for those presentations. They're very informing and very helpful. I jotted down my question because as all of you were talking, it occurred to me, how does our individual outreach efforts, each of us commissioners, how does that inform or augment our responsibilities as regard ex parte communications, the Brown Act, Public Records Act and such, especially if our outreach activities overlap with fellow district commissioners or our commissioner at large? Are we supposed to record our activities and keep notes or just proceed on good faith? How does that work?
Well, let me briefly speak and then Mr. Churchill will give you the more detailed answer. This is actually the big group motivation why we wanted that online list. Because the thought is, come September, if you had to report at the start of each meeting, all of your ex parte communications, it's likely to take an hour. So we are anticipating considerable outside discussions on your part. And then I'll leave the details to Mr. Churchill.
And so you're conducting the public's business and you're conducting it in public, right? That's what the Brown Act requires and what the Public Records Act requires. What they give you some leeway, of course, whenever you as individuals or even as a group of less than a majority happen to go out and talk to people. What the ordinance does require is, as Mr. Johnson says, we want to know about those communications. So I would say whatever the best way for you to keep track of those, if you have coffee with someone, you might just want to make some notes. I mean, the way we do the minutes, I think, is instructive in terms of how to capture the high points without saying, so many things can be mundane in conversations, right? That are, at least to us in the conversation, the most interesting parts, but maybe not to anybody else, and certainly wouldn't be necessary to comply with the Brown Act. So hit the high points like we do in the minutes, and NDC will make sure those things get printed so we don't spend the entire meeting going through all of what you should have been doing, right, in between the meetings.
Yeah. And a rule of thumb I always talk about is, briefly mentioned in there, is when you're talking outside, the safest way is to say, this is going on, this is why it matters. We want to hear from you, to whoever you're talking to, and encourage them to then share their substantive input via the email or the forums or all the ways, rather than sending it in through you as an individual commissioner. But I realize that's not always perfectly possible, but that's the goal.
Thank you.
Mr. Bray.
Just a question, as ambassadors to the community, do you see us going out to the farmers markets, to the service clubs, hand in hand with staff? Do we do it on our own? I mean, how do you see that kind of unfolding as us as ambassadors to the community?
I'm very glad you asked that. That's really the question I wanted to raise in your mind and start you all wrestling with, because there are different ways to do it. You know, the county has extremely limited outreach people, you know, to actually send all these meetings. A lot of county people are having regular meetings with a lot of county organizations and can include your messaging in those meetings, but they don't have people they can send out to all these events that we're going to want to send to. So then the question becomes, you know, how many of them are you comfortable going to yourselves, and what can we do to cover the rest? But there's not an easy answer, but we do look forward to working with you to figure out what you feel is the best answer to that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tarbell.
Can we have the county reach out to the different commissions with the word?
I can answer that. So, I mean, the short answer is yes. And already using our built-in audiences for county messaging and the different, I wouldn't say we're necessarily doing that right now, but I see a much greater effort as, you know, you've all just been getting going. And so we'll definitely be using our different resources to help. I mean, we have that built in a lot of those audiences already. And so it behooves us to communicate and utilize those resources and those contacts that we have. And we'll keep, like Doug said, we'll keep adding.
Yes, Commissioner Tarbell.
Well, just another question about if we reached out to individual companies, can we reach out to HR departments, and would our commission develop the flyer that we could maybe post online on their HR information places? So is a flyer developed within our group here, and we all use the same one, that we could reach out to different places?
Doug, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Well, it's kind of both of us. So yes, that is exactly the goal, is to have standard materials, and we'll work with the county to make sure that, you know, when people see it, they recognize it as being a county flyer. So yes, that is the goal. So you won't be expected to create the materials individually. It'll be, we'll create a package of materials so that when someone sees it, they know it's a county flyer and that they know it's a county redistricting flyer. Did I say that correctly, Jean?
I mean, I think the only other thing I would add is the commission can choose at their discretion if they want to bring in some consultants that me in particular, you know, us in communications would still be involved with, so that we make sure that it is, you know, we're keeping it within, you know, proper branding, and that we are watching for all of those, and then it's our audiences. So there's no way for us not to be included in this process, but you certainly can choose as much or as little outside assistance. I am not a trained graphic artist. I'm just going to say that right now. I've been a communicator, but not a graphic artist. But we do develop a lot of our materials in-house. There are some things that special projects we get to outsource. But we do a lot in-house. So that's, you know, we'll work with the commission as you choose. But definitely you don't have to make these yourself, and everyone should be using the same materials.
And to that point, I think one of the items that's still on a yet to be, you know, future agenda is some discussion around budget. And you know, just
right.
Anyway.
And I would just add to that too, keep in mind that all the materials we develop will have to be developed in a whole bunch of languages. So obviously we'll be bringing help for all that.
Correct.
Good.
I have one last question.
Yes, go ahead.
Do we have, I think we have a tagline, right? is it just draw the lines? Is that, I saw that somewhere in the information. Is that a tagline that we're going to use, or to like?
Doug,
get
do you,
beside
have you,
that and-
I'm sorry, Commissioner. Is there a tagline that NDC is using? I don't have one.
No, it's just the only messaging was the so far is really the materials encouraging people to apply for the commission in the first place. So you're certainly welcome to develop your own. We will bring you lots of samples. As I mentioned, we don't have graphic designers at NDC, but we've done this hundreds of times. We have a lot of samples to give you ideas. So yeah, there's been draw the lines, draw Santa Barbara, all kinds of things like that.
I don't think we've gotten too creative yet,
right.
But we want to.
There, Commissioner Twibell, you're probably referring to in the ordinance, it does say it shall be known as you draw the lines.
You draw the lines.
You draw the lines, County of Santa Barbara Citizens Independent Redistricting Commission. So that is the section in the county code. It says this section shall also be known as you draw the lines, County of Santa Barbara Citizens Independent Redistricting.
Sounds like a good start. Okay, we have a couple of folks that have been very patient and have hung with us for the full evening. I'd like to open the opportunity for some public comment around agenda items 12, maybe 13 if there's anything there, and 14. So the presentations that we've just had from staff. If there's anybody who has some input they would like to share with us at this point, now is your moment.
We have Lee Heller.
Chair Morris, can you hear me?
We can, yes, ma'am.
I wasn't sure if the unmuting had been completed. Boy, thank you all for hanging in here so long in the evening. And good to see Ms. DePinto leaping in. She's always full of great energy and ideas. I think that our new commissioner brought up a really good idea in her interview that was echoed in the language that Mr. Johnson was using, talking about trusted messengers and going where people are. I've been working on vaccine outreach with some nonprofits. And if there's one place everybody's going to be going in the next 6 to 8 months, it's to get vaccinated. I hope. I really hope. And there are places where it wouldn't be suitable to try to communicate with them about the Redistricting Commission, but there might be opportunities to have materials available as people are sitting in their cars or standing in line. If they're interested, sometimes people have a little time to kill while they're waiting for their appointment. So I think there's a real opportunity there as outlined by our newest commissioner. I think that has some promise. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Very well. We'll bring it back and wrap this up. Commissioners, any final thoughts on any of the presentations you've heard tonight? Mr. Bray.
I'm sorry, just a quick question for Dr. Daniel. It occurred to me when he was talking about population, I've not heard any conversation about Vandenberg Air Force Base. And there are probably 4,000 uniformed members stationed there. Are they like a prison? Their home of record is I didn't mean it that way, but is their home of record where they are counted? Because that's a pretty large population up here in North County.
Yeah, definitely. So if they filled out the census and said my residence is here in Vandenberg Air Force Base, then they're considered a resident of the county. Correct me if I'm wrong, Doug.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. If they filled out the census, or if they are in a group quarter like a barracks, they get counted there. They are not moved. The state is not going to move them back to their home residence. As you noted, it can be an impact on districts. We have some cities where it's a huge impact. For folks that don't know, active duty military are not allowed to run for office. And so we have cities and local jurisdictions where the base is the population of an entire district. And so we have to divide it up simply in order to get someone eligible to run into that district. So it can be a challenge, but the census largely counts them on the base, unless, as Daniel said, unless they fill out a form saying no, the residence is somewhere else, and they do get counted, even though the active duty people cannot run for office. Obviously, their spouses can.
Technically, it's wherever they laid their head on April 1, which is why we can count college students who may return to home to another city or state.
Mr. Almeida.
Yeah, I mean, that's a just clarifying question. So when I was active duty military, I maintained my home of residence, right? So, and when initially, before I got off active duty again, I was resident of Alaska for a while. When I was in the Army, I was resident of California, and I lived all over the world. Does that make a difference, like where I'm actually resident versus where I'm laying my head on April 1st?
So no, it doesn't. So it's where you are on April 1st, unless you fill out a form somewhere else. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you, Doug and your team. Very informative information this evening. I think that was very helpful. Commissioners, I think that brings us to the end. I wanted to just touch on Doug and his folks indicated some future agenda items. There's a running list at the tail end of your meeting packet. This would be an opportunity if there's something that you didn't see in one of those two places that you'd like to make sure gets on an agenda in the near future. Now would be the time to add it to the staff list so they can prepare for it. Anything that's missing from our next couple of meeting agendas. Ms. Caldwell.
I just wondered is the status of GIS data collection going to be updated so we can just see it in the packages, or how do we get that information?
So yes, that has been Daniel's main work for the last few weeks, is gathering all that together. Dan, you want to give a quick update on where that is, and we can certainly come back with more details next meeting.
Yeah, sure. So it's going really well. We have a lot of data from the county and also the individual cities. And so there's a lot that we have ready to present at this time, or if you want to wait until you want to kick the can down the road a little bit, you can, but I have plenty that I'm ready to show you now, and just let me know if you would like to see that next meeting or the meeting after.
We'll add it to the rotation. Anything else? I think we've got a good list running, but I want to make sure we don't miss something important early on. Okay.
Let me just, Mr. Chair, if I can, let me just say that the goal of tonight, as it seems to have worked, is to get you thinking about the materials. Obviously, we'll be coming back and revisiting all these, in particular, all these outreach elements once you've had some time to think about them and start putting those lists together.
Good. Folks, our next meeting is scheduled for March the 3rd. So note that's a change in day of the week. We'll be going to the Wednesdays. And it's also a change in our start time. For those of you in the public, we'll be beginning our meetings at 6 p.m. rather than 6:30. I will tell you, and staff and I've had a little discussion on this. My goal is to start getting us to maybe a 2-hour window of time for these meetings, plus or minus depending on the conversation. But we're going to try to kind of keep that kind of a pace there.
Chair Morris, I see a hand raised from a member of the public. I'm not.
Yeah, I see that. Let me just finish this and then we'll grab that. I also would just note that March the 3rd is before the County Board of Supervisors will be taking up Mr. Churchwell's hoped for replacement. So we will kick his cake and cookie party down the road a little further. And he'll be back with us at least for one more meeting. Right, Steve?
Yes, and looking forward to it. This is, as everyone seems to agree, a wonderful group of people.
And I do note that Mr. Caldwell has raised his hand. Let's give him one last moment, and then we will wrap up. So, Jeff, if you could, there we go. Andy.
Chair Morris, members of the commission, what I think would be a very useful and informative exercise for your commission in a future agenda is to look at the existing county district map and then have the doctor of demography, kind of run over that via each of the criteria. So you kind of got a practice run at what is the situation today, and whether or not you could pick out things that you think work or don't work. I think it would be a good dry run to get a practicum on where we're at today, how these criteria fit on a real map that was adopted, and whether or not you think it actually worked for the region.
Very good. We'll add that to the scenario planning exercise. Folks, with that, I think we've come to the end of our evening. We wish you all the very best. Thank those who shared you with us this evening in your homes, and we'll see everybody back here on March the 3rd. Have a good evening.